Today's guest is Amber Kasic. I met Amber at the IANDS conference, International Association for Near-Death Studies. We found out we both had lost our dads and both had some fascinating and life-changing experiences afterwards. However, Amber has since gone on to discover she has mediumship abilities, all first discovered around the loss of her dad. Amber Kasic is an evidential medium, author, speaker, and former classroom teacher. After a shared death experience with her father in 2020, she began a journey of discovery and connection with our greater reality. Guided by her dad in spirit, she shares that journey with audiences worldwide. She now inspires others to explore just what is possible in our lives, as love is limitless and we are connected beyond our human understanding. Stay on until the end, where I've added a bonus section. So Amber and I were having a coffee, and this was way after I recorded this episode, and she shared such an amazing story with me that I made her come back on and tell it here so I could share it with all of you. Hey everyone! I'm really excited to let you know about the science and spirituality salons I'm now hosting. During these intimate events, a scientifically verified psychic medium will give all of you readings, and I will give a talk on the science and evidence that changed my mind about an afterlife. This will also be an amazing opportunity to get to meet some of you in person or virtually, and to share more about all the science and data that transformed my worldview and got me through my worst days. These can be hosted in your home, in a nearby cafe with a private room, or they can even be virtual. I've hosted a few already, and they were really special, fascinating, emotional, evidential. So if you're interested in getting a small group together over dinner, brunch, drinks, coffee, to learn more about the science and to get evidential medium readings, send me an email at hello@WTFJustHappened.net and put science and spirituality in the title. Welcome to What the F Just Happened? I'm your host, Liz Enton. If you listened to the intro, you know my story. If not, here's a brief summary. I'm a sciencey-skeptic, and when my dad died, I took a shot in the dark and decided to investigate if there was any possible evidence of an afterlife. I assumed that was as realistic as Santa Claus, but I was desperate. However, I was so blown away by what I discovered that I wrote a book and launched this podcast. In this podcast, I'll be talking to some fairly normal people about some really weird stuff. I speak with everyone from psychic mediums and afterlife researchers to ordinary people who've had some inexplicable experiences. So come, listen. There's no need to draw any final conclusions. Keep an open mind and wonder, what the F just happened? Hi everyone. Today I am speaking with Amber Kasic. Amber is a medium, and I met her at the IANDS, International Association of Near-Death Studies conference, and we found out we had a lot of similarities in our stories, which we'll go into today. So welcome, Amber. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Oh, well, thank you so much. In a way, I wish I was interviewing you after reading your book. I have so many questions for you. But I'm very happy to be here, Liz, and just talk a little bit about my story and mediumship. I am a really regular person, a wife, mom. I have a full-time job in educational consulting. I was a teacher for many years. But in 2020, I had a shared death experience, which I didn't even know that was a term, with my dad while he passed from hospice. And he really just took me on a journey that I kind of couldn't deny, and was like a breadcrumb journey toward belief that he was communicating with me, that reality is so much greater than just what we experience with our human biology. And eventually that led to mediumship abilities as well. So when I have the heart space, I also offer mediumship outside all the regular life stuff that I do.
Yeah, and it's interesting she had a shared death experience. If you heard my previous episode with William Peters, we met at a table. You could get extra small intimate lunches with some of the keynote speakers at the conference, and I picked getting to meet with William Peters, and Amber was there, understandably, since she had experienced this. So first of all, let's just get to know you a little bit and get to know your dad. So tell us a little bit about your dad.
Oh gosh. Well, he had just such a great personality in so many ways. Everybody that knows my dad describes him as charming, as fun to be around. He had an amazing voice. He was an outdoorsman, loved nature, probably would have loved to have been a cowboy, in all honesty, if he could have been. Just a really special man. But also very complex, as many of us are. We all have complexities to our personality. But, people often say to me, oh, you and your dad must have been so close. And it's so interesting because I don't necessarily see it that way. It's different. I do think kind of at a soul level, we always just got each other, but also sometimes we were very much like oil and water and didn't always rub each other the right way. And, my dad, when I was younger, had some time periods in his life where some things that he was doing really brought a lot of turmoil to my family, actually. And it was something that we never really talked about. And I think sometimes also that had an effect on our relationship in some ways. But he was a great guy. Saved some people's lives at times in his life. He would always be one to jump in and help, and especially with his physical strength and bravery.
And he sounds both wonderful and complex and just a human, like all of us. I mean, I think they say that's why we're here, because we have so much to figure out. And well,
Absolutely.
So yeah, tell us, I guess we should get right to it because everyone's wanting to know what happened with your shared death experience. And that sounds like that was just the first step among many of just a profoundly life-changing experience.
Yes, it absolutely
What happened?
was. Something I didn't expect at all. I really grieved my father's passing for about the year and a half before he actually passed. But, while he was in that kind of last 24 hours, I was with him, of course. I had spent the whole week in my parents' house. And I was there laying in the recliner right next to the hospital bed that was in the living room and holding his hand. And I was just in a place of thinking about all of the things that now were never going to be. So, all the things in the future that were never going to be. I was thinking about things in the past that were left unsaid and undone. And basically, the future and the past were painful. Any of my thoughts were painful. The only place that wasn't painful was if I was just completely present in the moment. And I almost think it's not by choice, but almost by force of just escaping the pain that I just really became fully present, because in that moment he was here. In this moment I could hold his hand. In this moment I could feel the warmth of him. And as I was sort of in that present moment, absent of thought, I suddenly saw swirls of purple, like swirling in my mind's vision. I had no judgment to make about it. It just was. And then I felt a whole warmth encompass my whole body from head to toe. And I remember thinking, oh, the sun must be coming in from the window. and just kind of, warming me up. But then I had a sensation that never in my life have I had before. And that was that I felt a whoosh and truly felt like an energy enter my back. And I'd like to clarify with people, that wasn't vocabulary that I ever used before. Right now I might recognize that as things to do with Reiki and people's energy and this and that. That wasn't something that I was into, knew about really, other than just hearing what that's all about. But I very clearly felt a whoosh in this energy enter my back. And then slowly it swirled around my heart center. Again, heart center. That's not a word that I would use before, but that's what was happening. And it was these slow circular motions, unlike any physical sensation that I've ever experienced, and really defies logic. We've all felt little things inside of our bodies before, chest pain to this, but when have we ever felt something slowly circling around? And I just had to observe that. I couldn't even make judgment about what was going on because I had no time, A, and B, I was just in the moment. And I felt that feeling go from that circling motion here to my shoulder. And then I felt it travel down my arm. And then I just knew with total certainty that that feeling went into my dad. I had no idea what had happened. And I didn't really have the time to think about or even try to analyze and figure it out. I just knew I had this experience. And I said to him, Dad, I don't know what that was, but I know you felt it too. And you take all that love and light in your core with you, and you take it when you go. And I had to leave actually at that time. But it came with this feeling of we are eternally bonded. And I had complete peace in that moment. I actually left the house in a weird way, happy, which makes no sense, but I did. And he did die a handful of hours later on November 1st. And really from there, the journey just continued. And to kind of briefly describe, immediately that very day of his passing, I started hearing his actual voice in my mind. And of course, this is just me making it up. Of course, I wasn't even interested in coming up with this question of, well, could he really be communicating with me? But then I clearly, at one point, when I was in the car at a park, I just needed to decompress and go for a walk. And I was having some tears. It wasn't even grief tears. It was exhaustion tears from the moments of the week. And I heard him say, in his own voice, in my mind, get out of the car, Amby. You've cried enough tears over me in your life. And I thought, wow, that's true. I have cried more than I ever should about my dad. And then I thought, again, oh, okay, that's interesting. I must be making that up. And as I started walking to myself, I said, I hope you're all right, Dad. And I instantly, without a second of hesitation, heard again in his voice say, I'm fine, Amby. I've got to stick around here a while and help some people, and I'm happy about it. And in that moment, I actually did stop walking because I recognized that I would never have come up with that. Myself as Amber would have said something like, heaven's so beautiful. I'm with my dog Thunder again. I get to see my mom and dad. And it's, I would have said something like that. Never could I have come up with, or would I have come up with, I'm going to stick around here a while and help some people. And that was the very first inkling that I finally thought, am I actually experiencing communication with my dad? And that started really a whole year of further communication and a breadcrumb journey.
Which I 100% relate to, slightly obviously different, but the core of what you just said, I relate to. Except to clarify, you did think there was an afterlife, but you thought it was like a heaven, that the Judeo-Christian biblical definition of heaven more, or?
No, I didn't necessarily think that, but well, first of all, it depends on when you're asking about in various points in my life, right? Like all of us, we have faith journeys and different ways of growing and thinking about things. But at the time of my dad's passing and the years immediately before that, um, I remember even saying to my dad one day while we were watching TV, I don't remember why it came up, but it did. And I said, Dad, I just think whatever is the beyond is so much greater than our human brains are capable of understanding, that I just feel there is something greater. But I also don't subscribe to this idea that some people are punished and, depending on your belief system and all that kind of stuff. There's something about that just never well, I shouldn't say never, but at some point in my life stopped making sense to my heart, if that makes some sense.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. I would think we're probably all raised with one viewpoint, or maybe some people are raised with a couple alternatives, and then you start to question it. So, or you're exposed to one viewpoint, So that was,
Mhm.
yeah, that was at least my journey. I was only exposed to either the Judeo-Christian biblical sense, which, just seemed like nonsense. That wasn't part of my culture at all. It was just, that was kind of considered like, I guess wasn't the only one I was exposed to, but like when I learned about like Zeus and all those gods, it was like considered as archaic and
Mhm.
to in the culture I was raised in. So it was just, when you die, you die. The only other alternatives were Zeus or Judeo-Christianity. And I was like, well, so,
Sure.
but then exactly as you said, just a year of breadcrumbs. So you had that experience. And after that, what would you say was the next thing that kind of verified? Or, I mean, I guess let me ask actually afterwards. So you had that thought that you as Amber would not have thought of that. So maybe
Mhm.
something's going on. Now, did that stay, or was it the next day a little like me where you were like, well, that was a nice moment. I must have told myself this. Did you start rationalizing it
Of
away?
course, absolutely. I did. But I think this is the beauty and something for us all to understand, because this isn't just my story, even though I appreciate the time to talk about this. But I think that some of us maybe have a more natural ability at this than others, but we all have the ability in some way to recognize what's coming from our brain and what's coming from our so-called metaphorical heart. What I mean by that is what's coming from our essence that is something beyond the stories our brain wants to tell us. I don't mean the heart as an organ, obviously. Um, but I think we all have that ability. And so, yes, I would rationalize it away. It must be grief. I must have made that up. But you know what? If I'm real honest, there was something in my essence, in my heart, that was kind of going, I don't know. I think it might be something more. Um, that didn't mean I suddenly believed, but I believe that choice to be curious and open allowed me to follow the breadcrumb journey that my dad was putting in front of me. And so the next thing is, it just started with probably what's what you're going to ask. It started with the stereotypical, uh, all of a sudden, every time I come home, there's like tiny feathers everywhere. I don't even know where they're coming from on the floor, but literally, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I
And
don't
you'd never
believe.
seen feathers before.
No,
You didn't,
but
they
and not
weren't
only
something
that,
that,
but I didn't believe in that kind of stuff. It didn't mean I didn't believe in something greater, but I did not believe, oh, our loved ones give us coins, oh, our loved ones bring us feathers. And a part of that for me was like, well, what are they doing? Picking up feathers and literally putting them physically on the floor. So, but at the same time, it's like my heart couldn't deny that. Why are there suddenly every day when I come home feathers in my house? Why? I don't ever see them, right? They're all on the floor. And I would start to have other things that were consistently popping up. And again, just these breadcrumb journeys. But I didn't trust myself. And so I decided to visit a medium. I had been to a medium one time in my life, simply out of pure curiosity. And it was an interesting session that I had, but I didn't walk away from it like changing my worldview. But I decided to go. And I thought to myself, if this is really happening, if I really think that my dad's presence is around, somehow she's going to tell me. Not only is she going to tell me that I'm experiencing this, but I'll have really good evidence. And I did. Not only did she tell me that I already knew my dad was around, especially when I'm walking in the woods and I'm seeing signs from him, and all that was true. And she had no information about me other than my first name, my first real name. And then my dad said some things to her that first of all, if you were a medium and you said to someone and it's not really what you're hearing, you'd be kind of a jerk, to be honest with you. Because my dad had said to me, I was a jackass and I'm going to make it up to you in my own way. So if you are a medium and no information has come to you about any of my dad's, those complex qualities we were talking about and his problems, and this was the first thing out of her mouth, you don't just say that to somebody unless you're actually hearing that. And he was a jackass at times. And there were some things left unsaid and done that we should have been able to come to terms with in life. So I knew when I left that session, yes, I am experiencing this. And then that was like the next whole phase of the journey.
I got chills over that. And so, yeah, I would agree that a medium faking it would, I mean, the immediate thing they'd say was, oh, they loved you. You loved them. And then if they sensed, maybe they'd try to pry a little, but no medium would fake it that way.
Yeah, it was the very first thing out of the mouth of the medium. The very first thing. And then, of course, that was, then there was lots of other evidence all about my father, and none of it found an obituary, by the way. But that was the very first thing out of her mouth.
So then you said it kind of went to the next level after that. What does that mean? Go into that story a little.
Well, this is where I thought, okay, this is actually happening. So now why is this happening? For really, I'm on year 3 of this journey. For the first 2 years, all I did was ask myself, what is the science that is fostering this? Because I didn't have a belief system that there's some God with a magic wand who's going, zip, I'm zapping you with mediumship abilities. I didn't believe that. So for me, it was what's happening, which means I started reading. I started trying to understand because I knew now I was believing myself. So what's going on? And I wanted to dive into it from a knowledge perspective. And as a snippet part of that, my mom, who did not know any of this was occurring, I was afraid to tell her. She sent me this course that she randomly saw, and my mom did not believe in mediumship at all, absolutely zero. But she saw this course by a woman who was one of the most senior officers in our United States military, very credible individual. And she happened to see this thing on social media from her, and it was a course called Soul to Soul Communication. My mom sent it to me and said, I don't know why, but for some reason, I just feel like you would like this. And when I got that, I thought, A, how interesting, because my mom has no idea what I'm experiencing. Not one thing. And B, this is exactly what I need. This is what I need to understand what is happening to me. It wasn't a course called mediumship. It was a course called Soul to Soul Communication. And that's what I felt what was occurring. So how interesting that the course was speaking to my belief system to allow me to take that next step on the journey.
That's pretty amazing. So did anything change when you started taking that course? Was there something you especially learned? Also, if you want to say the name of the course and the medium, people.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Someone here wants to take it.
Yeah. So the course again is Soul to Soul Communication by Suzanne Giesemann. who is an extremely revered medium and one whom I respect very much for not only the way that she teaches and speaks about mediumship, but also just the reverence that she has for what we're doing. It was a fantastic course. But because I was taking the course, which was nothing to do about trying to become a medium, I was just trying to understand how this was happening, this communication with my dad. But it meant I had to start meditating because that's part of the course. So I did. And this began that next part of the communication because he started telling me things I couldn't possibly know. For example, he helped me feel one day at a meditation, there's a joke between your mom and I. That came across to me as a sensation or just a knowing. But then I heard about a mark on her butt. And I thought, there's a joke that my parents have about a mark on my mom's butt? Like, how odd.
Did you even want to know
Right,
that?
right, exactly. And I got to tell you, there's so many times when the type of information I got was almost funny, but it's like it helped me know there is no way I would invent that. No possible way. And for me to reach out to someone and ask if this is true about you, I have to be really courageous because, right? Because it was so kind of odd information. But I called my mom. I did not tell her that I was in this course having these communications, but I did express, I made up. I had a dream about dad, and he told me that there's a joke that the two of you have about a mark on your butt. And she started laughing, and she did say, what's actually on his butt? Oh gosh, she's
Is
going to
that
listen
just
to
a
this.
little more than you ever wanted to know about your
There were
parents?
like other intimate details that she told me, but it was definitely a very intimate joke that they had about this. And though it was like those little breadcrumbs, and probably maybe the most beautiful of that type. And I was not meditating in this instance. I was actually in the middle of work. I was doing a project, really concentrating. But all of a sudden I felt, because by now my body is starting to recognize that I feel energy. My ear will ring. Things happen physically for me where it makes me take a pause and kind of calm my mind and just perceive. And as I did that in the middle of this work project, my dad said, call your mom now. She's eating pudding and she's sad. I was so afraid to call my mom. What if I made that up? What is it going to mean? What is all this going to mean if I call her and she's not eating pudding? And so I didn't for about a half an hour. And then I got up the nerve and I spoke with her and I said, Mom, about a half hour ago, were you eating pudding? She is just crying, sobbing. Yes, I haven't seen my mom eat pudding since I was a kid. I I don't even know that she has pudding in her house. But this is so beautiful. It's not just that she was eating the pudding. She was eating the pudding because she was having a frustrating moment of grief, trying to fix something in the house that my dad would normally deal with, and she couldn't do it. And it was just making her overcome with the grief and a reminder that she's, alone now. And so, what a beautiful way for my dad to help me on this journey of ever growing belief and also letting my mom know I'm here. And at that time, I had to start telling my mom what was happening.
And how did your mom react when you told her?
That made her so joyful and full of grief all at the same time. For her, it was that like just before that, I had started giving her these clues and telling her things that I was experiencing. I don't really think she fully believed me, but I get that. But that caused her to believe and brought her so much joy.
And I remember saying you had an amazing experience related to a spoon with your mom. What was that story?
So I don't have any, I don't like call myself this literally on my website or on any social media, but my own little kind of, if you will, nickname for myself is the gifting medium, because I am finding that every time I have mediumship connections, 90% of the time, the most perfect gift for that person, I buy days in advance of the reading because I get nudged to it and I just know it's not for me. And it always fits the reading perfectly. But this really started because of my dad. And so one day in my meditation in the morning, all I heard, nothing more, was simply Yankee Peddler. And that's a store in my town that I haven't been to in years. So, and they just have lots of different kind of random things. So I went because at this point, I'm on this journey. I don't know why I'm supposed to go there, but I just know I'm supposed to be there. And when I get there, I don't feel anything. I feel no reason why I'm there. I'm just unsure. And I kind of say to myself, I take a pause, why am I here? And because I know this is also on video, as I do that, my gaze is just kind of over on the wall. And as it naturally comes down, this is what I see on the wall. Ask your dad. And I thought, okay, I'll ask my dad. So I did. Dad, why am I here? Yeah. And I mean, how many stores have a sign on the wall that you can buy to say, ask your dad? Um, but so I did. And what I felt back, I didn't hear, but what I felt back was, you're there to buy gifts for people. And it's like I knew my dad wanted to buy gifts for people, but through me. I mean, Liz, this is like, how can this be real? It's so beautiful that we don't want it to be real. That's how cynical we are in life. We're so cynical that we don't want this to be real. But in that moment, I just thought, I have nothing to lose. I won't tell people this is from my dad. I'm just going to go with what's happening to me. And how interesting will it be to see if these gifts actually really resonate with people? So I did. I started picking, I would just name a person and I would feel drawn to something. I wouldn't hear my dad's voice. Again, the next part of the journey. It's almost like he physically walked me into mediumship abilities. First, I was hearing his voice, then that kind of went away. Now I'm experiencing pulls of energy toward things, right? Because he knew I was not going to sign up for a course on mediumship. He forced me into this experience. So I did. I picked out gifts for people. How ironic that for my cousin, I happened to pick out a little tiny succulent pot with a heart on it. And do you know, she called me, forced me into this experience. So I did. I picked out gifts for people. How ironic that for my cousin, I happened to pick out a little tiny succulent pot with a heart on it. And do you know, she called me and she said, you know, how funny. I just have gotten into succulents lately, and I have a heart shaped cactus that I've been looking for a mini succulent pot for. And your heart shaped mini succulent pot fits my heart shaped mini succulent. And I thought to myself, my dad would never buy my mom a wooden spoon. Not in a million years. Why would he do that? But I knew I was being, and I get drawn to this wooden spoon. It's just a wooden spoon. And I thought to myself, my dad would never buy my mom a wooden spoon. Not in a million years. Why would he do that? But I knew I was being drawn to it, and I was just surrendering to this experience entirely. What do I have to lose? Whatever, this is what I feel I'm supposed to buy, so I did. And when I gifted that to my mom, she laughed and cried at the same time. And she said, do you know that 2 months before your dad died, and then she pulls out her phone to grab the picture, your dad took a picture himself. He took out all of my spatulas. The family, you know, my dad loved to joke and tell stories about my mom. I swear, I think sometimes his stories about my mom helped him live a little longer than he was supposed to. But in that instance, I knew my dad really did. He picked out gifts for people through me. And I don't know if I can even imagine something more beautiful than that. And now that shows up in my mediumship readings. It's just amazing.
So I'm going to ask you a little bit more about your dad, and then we'll go into your medium readings for other people and in general. What
Sure.
what would you say, is there one sign you got from him that was the standout that you're just like, you said you read my book, like Me with the Green Feathers.
Yes. It's hard to say because there's so many different things that happen in different ways. But this one, for some reason, just really touched me on a whole other level. For the first year, this only happens periodically now, but for the first year, most mornings when I woke up, there was a song in my head. Most mornings. And a lot of times they were songs that I might know the chorus to, but I don't, they're from the 80s, the 70s, the 60s, stuff that I know, but it's not like I'm listening to that. And on this particular morning, there was a song in my head that I did not know, but I knew it was a song. I had to go look it up. It's by the Fifth Dimension, and it's called Up, Up, and Away. By the Fifth Dimension. How interesting. And part of the chorus is we'll float together amongst balloons and the stars. You and me will fly together. And this is kind of like a repeat line. And so I went for a run that day, and I'm running in my favorite spot, and I'm listening to my music, and I'm listening to that song in particular because by now I'm building like a playlist of songs from my dad in spirit that he's giving me every single morning. And that was on my list. So I was listening to it, and all of a sudden I just feel stop while I'm running. And by now, at this point, I just learned to listen to what my body is telling me and my sensations are telling me. So I stopped. And then I feel just a knowing, turn around. So I go and I start running in the other direction. And then again, I feel stop. So I stop. I'm listening to this song and I'm going, what's happening? Like I'm just on a trail in the middle of the woods. Why am I stopped? And I look down just naturally, like waiting for something. And I'm standing on top of balloons and stars, confetti in the woods on a running trail. Not just any confetti, balloons and stars, confetti. And that is the lyric over and over of the song. We'll float among the stars together, you and I, in my beautiful balloon. It brought me so much joy and wonder. Wonder is the word, and awe. How is this happening? It doesn't make any sense. It defies all logic. Even the sense of wonder and awe make me, at the time, in your brain, make you feel silly, make you feel gullible, make you feel ridiculous. But I tell people all the time, let the love in. It will change your life. You got to let the love in at some point.
I love that. Yeah. That's a pretty, I mean, that's just so random. I assume I'm just going to have to ask, you don't often see balloons and confetti and star confetti on that trail, I'm guessing.
No. No. No.
And just to refresh our memory, that song popped into your head that morning or earlier that week, or
Yes,
just out
and
of nowhere.
it was that morning, and it was like a puzzle. That's also why this is so amazing. It was a puzzle because first I just got the chorus, the one line. It was like my own thoughts, but I knew it was a song. I had to look it up. I had to search the chorus that I was hearing because I don't know the song. I don't know that song. So then I was asking myself all day, why am I hearing this song? And well, the message is metaphorically beautiful, right? We'll float among the stars together, you and I, my beautiful balloon. But you're also like, oh, I must have made this up. I didn't know this song. Your brain will do that. Your brain wants control. It wants prediction. control, understanding, physical laws, right? That's what our brain's supposed to do. It's a beautiful thing, but you got
So
to let the love.
since you said the puzzle thing, I want to tell you a quick story that I don't think I ever told you. So I'm just going to add to everyone, Amber and I were coincidentally, I still use the word coincidence, mediums will kick my ass for still saying this, ended up sitting next to each other at the IANDS conference. We both, I guess, are like close in age, like, and there tends to be overall a lot of, not, but overall a lot of older people. You don't see as many like people in our age group there. And we were,
Absolutely, yeah.
which doesn't matter for in terms of who you bond with, but it's still. I also, very close with my dad, but there's certain areas I had some kind of complex issues too. And I touch upon them in my book. I'm going to touch upon it a little in my next book, but it's around a lot of very much based, I think, in the culture I was raised in New York, on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Very, very toxic academic pressure. And I was in like private schools that were, I would say I have like trauma from them, like horrible. Like you could not pick. The only way these schools could have been worse was if they were actually boarding and I had to spend more time there, but they might as well have been because I was up doing the homework till 2 a.m. Just, I mean, it's a whole other story. I might write a whole book about it. They were like abusive, toxic, incredibly rigorous academically when they just nothing to do with who I was. And I have a lot of anger with my parents about that because I was dealing with a lot of trauma with them and kept being pushed. And my dad and I had a lot of fights about that. And my mom has apologized in my adult years. My dad wasn't so good at apologizing about those kinds of things. And I'll still argue with him in my head. And it's come up with mediums too, where mediums will be like, I don't know, your dad says get over the past, which is how he would be. But he also was in total denial that the schools were good. And I'm going to add one more thing about IANDS. I'm sorry to use so much time talking about myself on this. I know it's really, I try to keep the podcast about the guests, but this ties into everything. So one other thing about IANDS is you have like 4 talks you can go to at the same time, and they all sound incredible. And it's a really hard decision. And so I was looking at when Amber's was, I was like, well, I kind of really want to go to this. I really want to go to this. You don't know exactly what they'll be about. I was like, well, I met Amber. I really should go to hers. And then I'm also kind of just feeling like annoyed at my dad and remembering the time he once said when I was talking about how traumatic the elementary school was. And he's like, well, you sure made up for it, and mentioned my high school. I was like, no, my high school is just as bad. And he'd always kind of be like, well, you sure made up for it. But in my mind, I kept hearing, well, you sure made up for it. You sure made up for it later. And I was like, so angry. I go to Amber's talk. Not only the breadcrumbs which parallels in it, I first of all see an image of the feather that was my main sign for my dad, and her talk is about issues with her dad where he kept saying, you sure I ended up making up for it. And I was like, oh my, and there were just some other things where like some of my issues were really being dismissed as a kid. And I was just, it was a weird time that I was feeling angry while I was at this great conference. Everything was wonderful. And I suddenly was just kept hearing from my dad, like, but you sure made up for it. And I was tying that into a time we had a big fight where he was like, well, you sure made up for it with your high school. And I was like, no, my high school was horrible and toxic. And then Amber's whole talk was look at like, yeah, breadcrumbs and putting a puzzle together and a treasure hunt of signs for her dad. And that's exactly what my story is. Little like feeling like my dad and I are keeping our relationship going through like a treasure hunt and putting together a puzzle and little signs. So I was just like, that's what this was about. My dad's saying this was our story. So.
And I love that. And I am sure that your dad genuinely wants you to heal from that. And that's why we'll continue to end up in experiences and hearing those kinds of messages over and over until we internalize the healing.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's like some of it's like lifelong working on it. And, and I get so much joy from as you do the little puzzle pieces with my dad. And, we also were very close. So it was complicated. It sounds like, yeah, people are complicated. People have their own traumas when they have children. But
yeah, absolutely.
Then, so what is your relationship and interactions with your dad like right now?
Well, our relationship is beautiful. It was always beautiful, but it's beautiful on a whole other level. And in part because I did allow that love in eventually. And I was able to receive messages of healing from my dad, and they always came with mind-blowing evidence. So I knew that they were very legitimate. I got apologies that I needed. But I think more than anything, I also just really understood, this is so sad to say. I always knew my dad loved me, but maybe in some odd way, like, oh, I don't know, this sounds horrible. I don't know. Did I know he loved me? Someone once told me, I think you know your dad loved you. Maybe you just didn't hear it from him in the ways that you needed to hear it. That changed so much for me about the way I thought about things and some of our complexities of our relationship. But it's almost like on this soul level, I was getting to know my dad as a soul, not just as Frank in the physical, but as a soul. In one point, that was causing me a lot of grief because I remember thinking, Dad, I feel you as a soul. And my human part of me wants you as a soul in your physical body. Why couldn't it be like this before? Meaning this feeling of love and bond. But that's the human mind. And I don't know how to be more grateful for these experiences that I've had. And so our relationship now is one that has healed. It's fun. He still likes to tease me, make jokes. Just yesterday, he gave me this beautiful sign about something, and I didn't believe him at all. I completely doubted, and then it occurred, and I sort of said out loud to myself, "I'm sorry, Dad," and I immediately heard back, "Ah, it's all right. I'm used to it by now," with a laugh in the background. And it's not that I, hear from him every single day in a way, but I know he's here, as are your loved ones, every day. They are with you at all times. That's hard for us to understand, but they are.
And I guess I'm going to ask a question based on that. What can people do if they aren't feeling their loved ones around or not getting any verification? Is there anything people can do about that?
I think the first thing to ask ourselves, all of us, is, are we just unaware of what's showing up for us in our lives from our loved ones? Is it truly that it's not showing up, or are we unaware? Because while I understand that I was gifted this experience of grace, I call it, even though it sort of unraveled itself, I still had to follow the breadcrumb trail. And then I still had to develop and understand what was happening to me. And through that process, I've learned that, kind of going back to what I said before, we all have some level of ability to experience our loved ones in some way that will work for us. We all know what intuition is. We all know that word. We've all had a moment where we just feel intuitive about something. And that's really, in a way, what this essence of spirit is. So I think we have to work to move the cloud of awareness of our brain off to the side and learn to start to feel with your heart in a way. And how do we do that? I think the best way is by mindfulness practices and learning what it feels like to really be present in your body and trying to slow down your thoughts. I have met mediums, I myself, but others that weren't born mediums, that didn't even necessarily have some otherworldly experience, but developed mediumistic type abilities, even if they're not formally mediums. Because I do believe in my heart of all hearts that on some level we all can experience this. On some level.
I agree with that. I think I'm a testament to that as someone who never had experiences or very rarely. And now
Can
I
I
do
tell you how
some. And
much I was laughing when I was reading your book so often because I was like, how is she feeling these experiences and still denying what's happening to her? I just wanted to shake you.
oh no, you're gonna kill me then still, because I still am like,
Ah!
no. I still question all of it. So
It's because you got to let the love in.
I don't know.
That's
I
for
let in
sure.
the love. I just still struggle with what mechanism non-local consciousness could actually
Yeah,
be. And that's where I always get stuck. I'm like, but how?
sure.
How?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I sort of tease because I do understand. Even for mediums, I think it's one of those things where, just like I said yesterday, I was doubting this evidence and this message that my dad gave me. So much I started crying because I thought this bad thing happened to me, and then I made all this thing up in my head. No, it was just on a delay, and then it occurred, and he said, we're used to it by now. We're a human. That's a part of what it means to be human. We got to have that rational side.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure it's like some of it's like lifelong working on it, and and I get so much joy from, as you do, the little puzzle pieces with my dad, and we also were very close. So it was complicated. It sounds like, yeah, people are
Mhm.
complicated. People have their own traumas when they have children, but
Yep,
um
absolutely too.
yeah. And so now I want to get into you as a medium. When did you begin to first realize you're actually a medium? Because it's one thing, I mean, it's remarkable and amazing but it's one thing that you get messages from your dad or for your cousin, you knew
Mhm.
what to buy, but that's very
Mhm.
different than a complete stranger. When did you
Right.
first notice you were getting messages and able to get messages for strangers?
Yes. Well, again, kind of a breadcrumb journey. And I think there's layers to that. There's starting to understand I have mediumistic abilities. Then there's the willingness to say I'm a medium. And then there's I'm a medium and I can't not do this for people. And those were kind of the three stages. So the stage where I was really first discovering I'm having mediumistic abilities, but I would not call myself a medium, was the first time I said, okay, I'm going to actually try to do this. Instead of just allowing experiences to happen to me, I'm actually going to like try. And I picked a friend that in my meditation, I said, for some reason, this felt like a safe person to pick. It wasn't family, because you would think, well, why didn't I pick one of my family members? Well, because that's scary. That's vulnerable. Then I have to go to them. And what if this is wrong? And then what are they going to think of me? Right. And this friend felt safe. And this friend had a biological father that passed when he was 2. And other than his career in life and the illness that he had upon passing, I knew nothing about him because my friend was 2 when he passed. And my friend, grew up with a father that wasn't his biological father because he passed in his toddler years. So it just was like this safe. And so I set the intention, went my meditation, and I said, show me. And all of a sudden I feel this presence, and it was male. And he says the name in his voice. I heard his actual voice. How do I know it's his voice? Because it's a voice that's male, and I have no knowledge of this voice. And he says, don't forget Sonny. And I just somehow knew it was Sonny, a name. I knew it wasn't like sunny outside. And then I said, well, what's if you really are my friend's dad, what other evidence? And he showed me wedding cuff links inside of a wooden box, showed me the color, their shape, their design, very detailed information. So I wrote it all down. And then, the next day, I reached out to my friend. Oh, and I want to briefly say this isn't verifiable, but it's just a beautiful part of what happened. This man thought this was funny because he's known me as long as I know my friend. And in my mind's eye, he reached his hand out to me, like to shake it, like an introduction. And he said, "Nice to finally meet you," with a smile and a laugh of the humor of the situation. I'm being introduced to my friend's dead father. I mean, this makes no sense. And so the next day I reached out. I told him about the cufflinks. He sent me a picture of them. They're not even at his house. His mom has them. Wasn't even something that he had in his own possession. He had to ask and couldn't remember what they looked like. And his mom sent them to him, the exact same picture as I described, including the wooden box that they were in. And then here's the amazing part. He couldn't, 2 days later, after that, he gets a card in the mail from a relative he hasn't spoken with or exchanged any communication with in 10 years. And what was his name? Sonny. It was his dad's biological brother. Hasn't communicated with in 10 years on any level. And guess what was in that card? Sonny sent an article to my friend about his dad, a picture of him, and was just like, "Hey, we haven't talked in decades. I happened to come across this. We should really get together," all that kind of stuff. That's when I knew I'm having mediumistic abilities.
And your friend had never mentioned the name Sunny. You'd never heard Sunny. There's no way you could have unconsciously stored it.
No, because it was a relative he didn't talk to. He's not close with that part of the family at all because his father died when he was 2. And let's just say somewhere in my subconscious, I stored that. How did I get these perfect wedding cuff links, design and all, the correct colors, the fact that they were in this wooden box, even how I described the little table that they were on with white background was in the picture. And then how is it that of all the things he happened to send him this card when they haven't spoken in 10 years, it happened to include a picture of my friend's father. That's way too many things.
Wow. Yeah. That's not easily explained away. And so when was the first reading you did for a stranger, or the first one that stands out?
So that little story I told you was when I discovered I had mediumistic abilities. But the day that I said I'm a medium and I accepted it, because that's a journey in and of itself. I think when you have integrity and you're doing this for the right reasons. We had gone to scatter my dad's ashes, 8-hour drive behind our old log home that my parents had built. And of course, I needed to knock on the door, right, and make sure that this man didn't care that we were scattering ashes in his backyard. So we had a real short conversation. I told him why I was there.
Wait, I'm just curious why you picked that
Oh,
house.
great question.
Why would you scatter your
Because
dad's ashes?
it was my dad's favorite place. My parents built that log home. It was out in the woods. My dad, it was his favorite place. It would be the perfect place.
Oh, and it was
Yes,
something
thank you. So
someone
now
else
there's,
had
of course,
bought.
new people living in the home. And so I stopped. The man said, "Sure, no problem, go ahead." Well, the next morning, because I always do 5-minute at least meditations in the morning most days, I experienced a male and female presence in this meditation. I wasn't trying, that occurred. And somehow I just knew these people are for the man in that house. I just knew. So I wrote down all the information they were giving me. I was feeling the man in this connection, he's helping me feel. I could feel the pain in my body. He gave himself injections in his stomach. I felt it. He must have had diabetes. I wrote this down. I wrote down other things, all kinds of things about them. And when it was done, I looked at it and I said to myself, how can I go to this man's house and just knock on his door and say, "Hey, by the way, I talked to your relatives who passed on. Like, can you verify this?" That seems absolutely ridiculous and kind of something we don't do as mediums. Don't just say to people, "Hey," but it felt like a mandate. And I also thought to myself, I noticed all the political flags out of this side of this guy's house. He is not going to believe this. I'm making assumptions. There's no way. For me to go knock on his door with this information is so insane and requires serious bravery, but I felt it was a mandate. One of the things that happened that I wrote down on the paper was that I saw a wooden box with a bird. Okay. When I knocked on the door, I decided to go. I got to do this. I have to. It feels like a mandate. And so my plan, because I have a lot of integrity in what I do, I wasn't just going to spew all the stuff. I was going to be honest and say, I think I'm a medium. I had this experience. I feel it's your people. Would you like to see this paper? That was my plan. So I got out of the car. He was already outside, so there's no turning back now. And I happened to notice a little cross on the ground, where you bury a dog. So I use it to make chit chat. And I said to the man, hey, I noticed that cross on the ground over there. You must have a dog. We had a big chocolate lab and blah, blah. And he looked at me and he had this huge hesitation, and I could just tell. He wasn't sure if he wanted to tell me whatever he was about to say. And then in his vulnerability, he decided, that's actually for my brother. My brother loved hummingbirds, and one flew in our house, and he was so sad, we decided to bury it in the front yard. Which is a very, it seems silly. Who buries a little bird, right? But in that moment of vulnerability, I just knew I can be vulnerable with him too. And guess what? Ding, ding, ding. What's written on the paper? A box with a bird inside. So I gave him the paper and I explained to him, listen, I've been having all these experiences after my dad passed. I really believe these are for you. I even wrote down on the paper a box with a bird in it, and here you are telling me, and I thought you just buried a dog there. So I gave him the paper. And one of the things on the paper that were for him, the life-changing thing, was that I wrote down from his mom. She has a kitchen pot holder. It's white. It has green with some type of flower that I think might be yellow. And this was really special. It was not allowed to be used. Well, he looked at that paper and he said, hold on a minute. And he went in his house. He was gone for 8 minutes, and he came out with that kitchen pot holder that was buried in a box in the basement that his mom had made with her dad, handmade. White with yellow trim, and the green also decor, and the yellow flower in the middle. Yeah. And he called me later and he asked me, why did this happen to me? Why me? Why did people come to me to give you this message? And without hesitation, and this is true for all of you, I was able to answer, because you are worthy. You are worthy of the love and connection that your loved ones will try to provide when they can. That's when I knew I'm a medium.
And beautiful story, really beautiful. And what were your next steps after that?
I started practicing with people, if you will, but with people that felt safe to me. And when I say that, what I mean is the last thing I would ever want to do is disappoint someone. If you're working with a medium with integrity, most people are nervous before mediumship reading. Guess what? So is medium. At least I am. I don't know. And the reason is we want to provide this love, and we don't want to disappoint you. We want it to go well. We want you to believe, but we also want to be able to be the connection that we need to be for you. And it's scary. It's scary for mediums too. And so I began to practice with people that felt safe. And people that felt safe to me were people that were also trying to understand mediumship and were kind of in classes. So I started practicing with them. And then I started believing, yeah, I'm a medium, like over and over. Yes, I'm a medium. And then for about 7 months, I just didn't do any more readings because I got to a point where I realized, yes, this is real. But the point of this is not to be amazed by myself. The point of this is to heal and to help provide love and joy and communication. And I wasn't ready. I wasn't ready to serve in that way because it was too scary. And then I had in a moment where I said, I'm ready to serve. And that was in one of these practice sessions. And this is a beautiful lesson for all of us about the nature of the soul. Because when we pass, we don't just pass at the time where we stop breathing. We're transitioning as souls beforehand. And in this experience, which might be at least of a story that I can tell because I've been given permission by the family, is probably in that case the most beautiful and evidential story. And as I sat with this woman, I started to feel in my head, I'm old and then young and then old and then young. And so I explained to her, I feel like a woman and she's helping me feel in my brain old and then young and then old and then young. And she's real petite. I can see it's like she's got little heels on and she's kind of scooting along, walking along, and she's got little shopping bags. And the woman looked at me and said, well, you seem like you're describing my aunt. She has Alzheimer's, but she's still living. She hasn't passed away. She's in a long-term care facility. And I said, well, this would be interesting, but well, don't tell me anymore. Let me see what else I experience. And this woman showed me a Virgin Mary statue with art utensils at its feet. So I described what I was seeing. And the woman said, yes, this is my aunt. She painted Virgin Mary statues, hand painted them for hobbies and gave them away to people. So yes, this is the aunt. How many people with Alzheimer's, petite, love shopping, shuffling along with their little heels, also paint Virgin Mary statues with art utensils? And so, but this woman has not passed away. How is this occurring is all I could think, but I had to surrender to the experience. And then comes a man into the session with a deep voice, and I can feel he's a real manly man. I feel it in my body. And I said, he's showing me he's this manly man with this deep voice, but you know what? I don't know why I'm saying this. He's putting on a dress and heels, and he's going, ha, 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 ha. And she says, oh my gosh, her brother, the one with Alzheimer's, at a recent family party just before he passed, mocked her, put on high heels and her little shopping clothes with the bags. And yes, he's a real manly man with a deep voice and was parading around like that. And this woman helped me see she's missing her things in the long-term care facility. She doesn't have her stuffed animal. She doesn't have her blanket. 8 hours later, I got a phone call from the woman. Well, she sent me an email, and then we exchanged phone numbers so she could call me. That night, the family went to the long-term care facility because of this connection. And yes, she was passing away. And yes, she was missing her things, missing her blanket, missing her stuffed animal. They found them in the long-term care facility's laundry room. And the blanket had a big picture of the Virgin Mary on it. And she passed away that evening. And I took the next day off work after that reading because it was so profound. And it's when I said, I can't not do this for people. And that woman told that story at the aunt's funeral. And she sent me the pictures of the uncle parading around in the aunt's outfits. It was just beautiful. And how beautiful to be able to bring her family to her in a time of need and for the comfort she needed to be able to pass.
That's an amazing story. And I mean, you've had lots of evidence, lots of amazing stories. And thank you so much for sharing. I'm going to wind it down with a couple more final questions if you have a little longer. I know we're going on a little over an hour already. Okay. So what would you say overall, what would you consider is the strongest evidence of an afterlife? Why are you convinced that we do survive bodily death?
Well, because of the story I just told. How is it possible that all of this occurred? This woman didn't even know her aunt was passing. No one in the family knew. They got the phone call that she was nearing passing hours after that connection. But it's not just, there's no one thing. It's that over and over, you have these very evidential readings. And some of them, people in spirit tell you things that the client doesn't even know and end up being verified later. I just had one last week where a woman's neighbor came through in the connection. And other than she knew there was a teenage boy in her neighborhood that passed and she knew his name, but she didn't know anything about him. And here I was, yes, uh, I had the name, but also I had all this information about him, quite a bit. Um, and she verified that with the parents. She didn't know anything about him. So how it's not even that you can be reading someone psychically at that point, right? Because she doesn't know. Another time, a person in spirit told a father in spirit told her daughter through me that her loved one went to the doctor today to get his hand looked at and know there would be no surgery. She had no idea her loved one was at the doctor that day. But she wrote me an email a few hours later to let me know, yes. So I think it's not one thing, it's that at some point, there's no other explanation for all of this. And I really believe that one day science will explain how mediumship is occurring. I don't even think that day is too far away.
I hope so. If I could guess, it will tie into quantum entanglement. Just and somehow string theory and quantum entanglement will somehow tie in some way. A much more advanced version
Yeah,
than we understand now. That's my unscient my
it makes
unprofessional
sense. I've thought
scientific
very similar
guess.
things.
So lastly I want to ask you, what do you want listeners who aren't mediums to know about
Well, as
mediumship?
I said, I went to one medium before all these experiences, like a decade before. And it's so interesting now with the experiences I've had, thinking back on that experience and things that I wish I had understood. So, a couple of things. If you visit a medium, of course, it should be extremely evidential, which means you're getting accurate and specific information about your loved one, things that aren't Googleable, not just found in an obituary. That's really important. But I write this when people reach out to me for a mediumship reading, they get a whole pamphlet to read from me ahead of time because people should know this isn't just like a magic wand ability and every medium somehow has this math formula and they all act the same. We're all different. We experience the connections differently, and those in spirit use the medium's consciousness, history, life experiences, background, knowledge, and then the senses that they can best work with to convey information. So you could see 3 different mediums with integrity, and you may get different evidence from each of them. My dad, for instance, most of the time when he comes to mediums, he shows up in a flannel and Levi's. And that's nice because it's funny when you visit 5 mediums and they all describe the same person. But there's other things that he can't get through to people. And it's because it's not a part of their, forefront in their consciousness. So for people that love hiking and love mountains, he's easy to get that information through because that's a bond we share. And so when you visit mediums, you got to be open, but also, of course, you should expect highly evidential information. And just keep that in mind, and be kind because, like I said, most mediums, especially if they're probably in their first half of their journey, first 5 to 8 years, are nervous just like you because they care. They want to provide you hope and love, and they don't want to let you down. So be open in that way. And the last thing I'll say, I've already said before, you got to let the love in when you get it. That's why your loved ones are talking to you, because they want you to let the love in. And you're missing out on the beauty of your mediumship connection if you got extremely evidential information and then you walk away doubting. You're not letting the love in. And I get it, because it took me a year to finally really go, yes, really, yes, I no longer doubt. So I get it. It's normal. It's a part of having a brain. But let the love in. That's what your loved ones want.
Know you, and that you get to share such a special story about your relationship with your dad. Is there anything else I didn't ask you that you wish I
Other
had?
than we're
Got
going
to
to be
everything, right?
friends, because I want to interview you now. I seriously have so many things I want to ask you when we get together.
Wait. Oh my God, that might be a fun podcast episode. No one's ever interviewed me on my own podcast.
Sign
You
me
want
up.
to do
I will
that for
absolutely do
real?
that. Yeah, no, this has been,
Okay.
that would be
Okay, we'll
fun.
do an
And thank you
episode
for this
like that.
opportunity. It means a lot to me, to not only share the story, but to reach people indirectly through my story, to let them know that there is love after life. So thank you.
And where can everyone find you,
Oh,
get a
yes.
reading with
So
you, follow
my
you?
website is www.natureswayopen.com. You can find me on social media the same way, at Nature's Way Open. I'm much more active right at this point on Facebook than I am on Instagram, but I am on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube. I've just started to get brave enough to post beautiful stories, not only about readings, but about just learnings that I've had from this, if you will, spiritual awakening. So you can find that at Nature's Way Open on YouTube as well. Thank you so much, Liz.
And now here's the story I had Amber come back on to share with you. So I ended up inviting Amber back to tell this story. We were having coffee. Sorry, pickles. Oh my God. Sorry. Excuse me. Pickles just unplugged. I invited Amber back on because we were having a coffee and she told me the most amazing story about her mediumship, and I wanted to make sure all of you got to hear it. So if you're wondering also why we're wearing different clothes and different backgrounds, I've since moved into my new apartment. It has a little podcast studio I put together, and Amber's, I think, in a different place as well. But that's why that's going on. And I think all of you guys are going to love this story. As well as I'm going to share one other weird story. I had this in my calendar for 3 p.m. and apparently Amber did too. And she texted me, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I have it at 3 in my calendar. I don't know what's wrong." And I was like, "Yeah, so do I. What's she talking about?" And I scrolled and we had both texted each other, "Let's plan for 2 p.m. today." Both of us have it in our calendar for 3. And I checked and she had not accepted my Google Calendar invite. Because at first I was like, well, yeah, of course it's in your calendar because I screwed up and must have somehow moved it. So somehow, while both of us had texted and planned for 2, both checked our calendar and it was at 3. And I just remembered it as 3. So that was a very weird thing. So we're having weird little things happen. So yeah. So yes. And you'll also be able to see us at the IANDS conference. We're going to be co-presenting, which I will put a little note and update about in this podcast or in podcasts. Okay, so yeah, so this story was batshit. So Amber, what happened?
It really is probably the top 2 most beautiful occurrences of mediumship that I've had. And I want to preface it by saying that this isn't typical. All sessions should be meaningful in their own way, but this was really just a whole other level. So I had been thinking it was actually November 1st, the day that my dad passed away. And I was thinking to myself, I'd really love to just donate a session to someone in honor of this day. And 2 hours after I thought that to myself, someone that my mom is an acquaintance of, an old work colleague, I don't know her at all, I've never met her, reached out to me and said that she would really love a session. She did explain why in her email and said that her brother was in hospice and she just was having a hard time and would love a session. And because I received that email just 2 hours after I had been thinking to myself, who could I donate a session to today? Kind of last minute. I just knew that she was my donated person and that was supposed to be. And so we arranged a time for a few days later to have our session. And as I was connecting for her, I immediately felt this man step in. And in my mediumship, most of the time, almost always, I have a system where someone who shows up right here is a brother or sister for me. A man who shows up right in front of me is always a father. Up here in the diagonal where I feel the presence are grandparents. So I have a little system. And this man came into this connection right to my side. I knew it was a brother. And oh, was he dancing? He was excited. I could feel that emotion in him. And I said, he comes into this connection and he's like having fun. He's ready for a celebration. He's dancing. I can tell that his personality with that is real fun. He was always liking to have fun. He was the one that would be at the family parties, kind of like getting people together, dancing, always, livening up the space. And I know this is your brother. I didn't know anything about her other than she had a different brother in hospice. And she said to me, oh yeah, I have another brother who has passed on. We called him Dancing Tim. That was his nickname. And so as I felt into more about him, he showed me all kinds of great evidence about him. We don't really have to get into all of that, but it left no doubt in our minds that this was him. And the important part of it was that he was saying to me, I can't wait to see my brother again. We're going to be preparing a family reunion, is what he said. And that's something that I, in my mind at first, hesitated to share because I'm always also being aware of this person in front of me who's here in this connection and is really going through some anticipatory grief with her brother passing. But at the same time, I could feel from this brother how truly excited he was and the sense of preparation that he had. And I knew he was going to be there to escort his brother to the other side. I just knew it. And so it was kind of nice to delicately share that with the woman in my session for comfort. But then came in the session this woman's mother. And yes, because again, I can feel that in a particular place. Her mother had already passed away. And she was here setting a table. She was showing me, I'm preparing a table. It was all about the family is ready to welcome him home. And she shared her beautiful evidence. But the evidence really isn't the most beautiful part of this story. At the end of our session, I had this image of the scene, the last scene in It's a Wonderful Life, when the little girl is there on the tree and the little bell rings on the tree and she says, every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings. I had this scene in my mind and all I said was that it felt like a future event is what I said. And so I did ask her, do you and your family, do you watch that every holiday season? I know that's common for a lot of people, but she said, no, actually we don't. And sometimes this happens in mediumship. You just have to say, okay, well, just remember it came up because it feels future to me. It may end up having meaning for you. So skip ahead 5 days from then. It was a Saturday morning. I woke up and I noticed that I just saw on social media there's this craft show going on at an art museum about an hour from my house. So I decided to go. And I'm at the craft show and I'm shopping all the things. And then I come to this whole tree of beautiful angel bells. And I didn't know why, but here I am at the tree and I'm ringing them all and I'm ringing all the bells. And I remember I kept saying to myself, why do I feel like I have to ring all these bells? So I picked one out. I bought it. 2 days later, I get a email from that woman that I'd had a session with now about a week ago. And she was letting me know that her brother in hospice had passed away. He passed away the day that I was at that craft fair. And one of the things that her mother showed me in our session was a purple dragonfly. And the reason that she was reaching out to me, and I told her in the session, I just know this is going to be a sign for you. This will be a sign for you for your brother, with some significance of his passing. And the reason she was reaching out to me was to say that on Saturday, her brother had passed and she was at a craft fair. Not the same craft fair that I was at. We don't even live anywhere near each other, but she also happened to go to a craft fair. And she had seen a little purple dragonfly on a table. Now, it was a holiday craft market show. So there was no reason for a dragonfly necessarily to be out on the table. But the vendor at the table said, just for some reason, I had just one of these left from my spring show, and I just decided to put it out. And so she bought that dragonfly in tears, and a half hour later, she received the phone call that her brother had passed. That is so beautiful and such a beautiful moment, but really it gets even more stunning. I messaged her back. She shared a picture with me of the dragonfly and just how beautiful this is. And then I sent the message. And then a half hour later, it hit me. Oh my gosh, I was ringing all those bells. That came up in our session. Just what if? And so I reached back out to her and I asked, may I ask you what time your brother passed? And so she got the phone call, because she was at that craft fair, from her sister at 2:11 p.m. Her sister was there when the brother passed, and she called right away. I called my husband because I wasn't even home, and I asked him, go get the receipt from the craft fair. I bought that angel bell at the vendor table at 2:11 p.m. So I was there ringing the bells at the moment of his passing. At the moment of his passing. A week prior, in that session, I had that image of every time a bell rings, an angel gets its wings, and told her, I just feel like this will be a future event. I could have no idea that he would pass. How is it that we both happen to be at craft fairs on the same day? She got her purple dragonfly at the craft fair, and there I was ringing the angel bell. All of this to say, sometimes these things are sacred. They're happening for sacred reasons, to demonstrate love and to demonstrate that everything is connected. It is absolutely beautiful.
To get more information on what the fuck just happened, go to WTFJustHappened.net. There you can order my book, WTF Just Happened, A Sciencey-Skeptic Explores Grief, Healing, and Evidence of an Afterlife. You can learn all about how I came to conclude that there most likely is an afterlife, but you can also learn about the early stages of my grief and the amazing, fascinating people I met along the way. You can read about how much I harassed the mediums and scientists trying to get evidence to see if the mediums were cheating and see if what everyone was saying actually was true. You can also subscribe to our newsletter to stay updated on any new developments and any interesting new what the fuck updates. So if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. It makes such a difference, especially for a new podcast like this one. And if any of you have had a crazy what the fuck yourself, have any questions, feedback, or just want to say hey, reach out on either Instagram at WTF_just_happened_, or email me at hello@WTFJustHappened.net. I love hearing from all of you. It makes my day hearing your stories and questions and feedback and all of it. And remember, you don't have to draw any final conclusions as you wonder, what the fuck just happened?